Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my review of The Ballad of Perilous Graves by Alex Jennings. And I would say this is a magical realism type story. I guess it's fantasy. I mean, it is in another world, but it's a parallel world. So this takes place in an alternate version of New Orleans that's called NOLA. It is a place where there are zombies that walk around. There are anthropomorphic animals. Music takes on physical forms. There are wizards. There's this one particular sorcerer called Fez that, although the people call him Dr. Professor, he plays the piano and he will perform for people at random times. There's always some kind of reason why he shows up. There are people with special gifts, and our main characters, Perilous, they call him Perry, Brandy, his younger sister, and their friend Peaches are kids with those gifts. Peaches is this young girl who, her dad is gone. It's just her, but she's super strong and super tough. She's very street smart. Perry is this boy who you don't know exactly what his gifts are. In fact, he's been running away from his gifts and from magic. He wants to be normal. And then you have his very resourceful sister, Brandy, who, again, I actually don't know what her gifts are either. I didn't understand what her gifts were. But they have been recruited by Dr. Professor because 9 of his songs have been stolen. And if the songs are stolen and taken away from NOLA, then NOLA could potentially disappear. So they have been charged to go find these songs along with Peaches. This, like I said, it was very magical realism. I guess it would be considered fantasy because it does take place in an alternate reality, but it's very much like New Orleans. And this world, to me at least, it feels very creative. And it's a really fun atmosphere, very magical. Kind of, it makes me think a little bit of the Disney/Pixar movie Coco, in the Land of the Dead, which they do go, there is a dead part of town but it's not dead in a sense, that there's nothing there and it's empty and people are walking around like zombies, just blank, and I can't think of a better word, but it's actually in a way, it's more dead than alive. Like, you have the zombies will dress up and they're celebrating Mardi Gras. And you have Perry, who's, like I said earlier, he's someone who's kind of running away from his magic, but he feels the weight of this responsibility to find these songs. But at the same time, he's very scared to use magic. Like, he is given, as part of his quest, he and his sister are sent through this magical door, and they get separated. And Perry lands in this weird play, in this, like, I kept picturing it like a beach, with a beach house, and he meets this godlike person, this goddess-like woman called Denkine, I think she called herself, and correction, he gets this, before he goes to meet her, he is given this sack that he can hold, that he can pull anything out, and he's supposed to, or put anything in it. It's this big, kind of like Mary Poppins' bag, in a way. And he has to use it to collect the songs, And whenever he collects the songs, he has to say, clickety clack, get into my sack. Which I thought that was fun. That was kind of funny. They're like this, it's almost like a fairy tale in a way. It feels very fairy tale-esque, but like very dark, like how fairy tales are supposed to be. And I also like that it very much focuses on Black culture, particularly New Orleans, and how music is so important to their culture and to the environment. It gives life to New Orleans. And that just felt so magical and whimsical and fun. Another thing I really appreciate is how the parent, Brendy and Perry's parents, particularly more so their mom, were actually like they understood what this burden, this responsibility their kids were given. They didn't try to be overprotective of them or dismiss them when they told of what Dr. Professor requested of them, because they of course know that Dr. Professor is real and they've seen him. And they were just, like I said, particularly the mom. The dad was a little more cautious, like, no, I don't want them going on this quest. It's like, it's none of their, they're too young, because they're kids. I want to say, like, I wish I could remember, like, it was either like 10 or 13 years old is how old Perry is. One of those ages. I don't remember. And, you know, the dad is like, they're too young. They shouldn't be. This is dangerous. And it does get dangerous. You know, because, I mean, of course, it wouldn't be as a good of story if it didn't have danger and conflict. And, in fact, one of the songs is an antagonist in the story. And that song is very dangerous. And Dr. Professor had no idea that this is one of the songs that was running around that was threatening them. And so all of a sudden, you know, he's basically in trouble with their mom and grandmother, because they don't want their grandbabies in danger. And actually the Peaches and Perry and Brendy are like, we can't trust him anymore. How dare he got us killed. He's gonna get us killed. And like, there's this whole theme of where the adults, where these kids, they're not sure if they're gonna trust the adults anymore. They see that there's a line that Peaches says about adults, like, there's no such thing as grown-ups. They're just kids, just playing pretend, something like that. And I think she means that adults, they act all wise and knowing, but maybe they're not always wise and knowing. And now they think adults lie, but it's not that adults lie, it's just that they don't know everything. They sometimes get things wrong, and they can let their emotions get the best of them. And of course, there are adults that do lie. They don't always tell kids everything, and sometimes they lie to protect the kids. And these kids, of course, they are on this quest, this very dangerous quest where they could get killed. So it's like, we're not that naive anymore. Yes, we are in the literal sense, we're still kids, and we're scared, but you are putting this responsibility on us. So then don't coddle us, don't treat us like we're little babies, tell us straight, tell us like it is. Because there are conversations they have with some of the adult characters, like the grandmother, Mama Lisa, where she doesn't tell them everything. She's very cryptic and tells metaphors, and Perry gets at one point really frustrated and he doesn't believe her. But she just tells him that, I am telling you the truth, you just gotta listen. And that's definitely a lesson that these kids learn, is that adults they're not stupid, and they're not lying to you, at least not on purpose. I mean, there are some that do lie to you, but not all adults are out to get you. You can trust them. You can trust your family, and they might not tell you everything, or they might miss things. They think Dr. Professor is not that all of a sudden he's lying to them and he doesn't care about them, and it's because he screwed up in a big way, made a mistake, and didn't realize the consequences of his actions. So I'm not saying they should have easily forgiven him, but also that they need to understand that, yeah, he screwed up, that adults are allowed to screw up. And I think a lot of us go through that when we're kids. We go through that phase of where we realize our parents are just human beings. They're allowed to make mistakes. We don't always agree with everything that they think, especially once we are away from them. Now, not of course in my case it's a little different because I've been with my parents. I live with my parents, so I don't. So if I moved out and went somewhere else, I might think differently than completely different from them, because I think that's normally what happens. You grow apart from your, you still love your parents and support, and but something changes your way of thinking as you learn that your parents, like I said, are human beings. They will make mistakes. And I think these kids learn the hard way that adults can make mistakes. And adults won't know everything. I really liked Peach's character. Sometimes it was like frustrating with, because I was like, you don't know everything just because you're street smart, doesn't mean you're an expert. She was very reckless and very haughty and very, I'm gonna risk everything. I'm gonna risk my life. I don't care what people think. She acted like this tough little girl who didn't cry, and that's, of course, she was kind of left alone to take care of herself. And she feels like she has to be tough. And I definitely felt bad for her. I was more annoyed by Brendy. Because I felt like in the beginning she was kind of bratty. Like, one of the gift that she is given is a rock, a stone. And in the beginning of the book, you don't know. She doesn't know. Her mom doesn't even remember what it does. She never learned what a stone like this could do. And I'm thinking, of course, she wouldn't get it unless it had some kind of power. Like, if there's something about it that was magical. But she's so dismissive of it. And she tries to pretend like she's accepting of it. And the whole time I'm reading that, I was like, of course it's magical. They wouldn't just give you a stupid rock that wasn't powerful. That didn't have something special about it. But she's already kind of... Her frustration about the rock, about just getting what she thinks is just a rock. And later, like I said, it later does become a help, an asset to them. It helps them. But I think she also is kind of annoyed because that her older brother, who had left her, they went to the same school together, which I think was the school where they would learn magic or something like that, and her brother decided to walk away, and he left her because they went to the same school. And I think really at the root of her frustration about the rock is that her brother gets this really cool sack, and her mom is able to tell them what the sack can do, what it's capable of, that it does, and it's made obvious in his magic. And so she takes out her anger on him, because it's not just about the rock. Her thinking it doesn't have any magic and it's just a rock, but also that she feels like he left her. But then he reveals his own fear of magic and not wanting to use magic and desperate for a normal life. So it not only doesn't have parents that I think are very supportive and understanding and realize, okay, my kids need to do this. They have been given this responsibility. I'm not gonna hold them back. I'm just gonna let them go. The mom admits that she is scared for them, but at the same time she's like, this is they have been given this responsibility, and I'm not gonna just hold them from fulfilling. I'm not gonna treat them like they're babies. They will always be my babies, but I need to let them go. But it also explores this relationship between this brother and sister, and how in the beginning there is resentment between them, but there's also love, and they really care about each other. And I love stories where they're siblings. More so sister stories, but I also like, brother and sister stories that explore that relationship dynamic. Whether it's and brothers too, of course. um, where it's messy, it's complicated, but there's love, and they will do anything for each other and protect each other and support each other. And actually, I would love to read more stories about sibling relationships, but in genres, not just in contemporary. I mean, I'm not just totally dismissing contemporary stories, but I want to see it more in fantasy, not just romantic relationships or relationship between parents and children, or relationship between friends, but also relationship between siblings. I would love to see more of that in a fantasy story. So that was definitely a plus. It is slow in the beginning. It does take a while to get into the story, and the chapters are a little bit long. So it took me a little bit of time to get into it, and I was still kind of debating about the novel I had started to read before that, which was Love of Stones, and I did decide to DNF it because I was getting bored with that one. And when I'm working, on work days, it's hard to find the balance of my reading time, because then when I get off work, I'm tired, and then I only have a few hours before I go into work. So on days that I'm working, I don't read as much. I mean, I do bring this with me to work, but I only get 15 minutes, as I said. So, but I definitely took advantage of my today and the other day when I had a day off and and was able to finish this. But it's a story that's not the kind of story I've read before. So I really liked experiencing this new type of fantasy story with a setting I'm not familiar with. I don't read a lot of stories. And like I said, I loved the sibling dynamic. Also, the relationship between Peaches and Perry was really cute. Very sweet. Very first love type of story, because Perry has feelings for Peaches. He really likes her, and she doesn't realize it. And I think she likes him too, but she acts all tough and stuff and pretending like she, not thinking about that kind of stuff at their, and trying to she doesn't need anybody. She appreciates having friends, but she can take care of herself. She doesn't need anyone to lean on. She doesn't, like I said, she doesn't like to cry in front of people, which I can, relate to that. I get embarrassed crying in front of people. I mean, if it's something like a loved one dying or something, then I'm not going to be embarrassed about crying about that. But I can relate to Peaches in this whole, not feeling comfortable crying in front of people. Yeah, I like the focus on music. I love to see this adapted, maybe into a musical, like a movie musical or a musical for the stage or something, because there's so much music in the story, and it has lyrics in the book. There's a lot of there's for each of the songs. And this would be great on audiobook, have the narrator singing the songs would be really fun to hear. I don't know if there is an audiobook, because I had never heard of this book before. I found it at a thrift store where my sister lived. They have a book section, and that is where I found this book. And I'm so glad this is a standalone, or at least as far as I can tell. I really appreciate this is a standalone. Sometimes, I love series, but it can be sometimes, especially if it's a book that's not as mainstream, or it's older, and older fantasy, sometimes, Books a Million doesn't always have, or, even the used bookstore within walking distance doesn't always have the next book in the series, or it might have a book from the series, but it's later on the series, or it only has the first one. And so, it's nice, as far as I know, this is a standalone fantasy. And of course, it did have an ending. Another thing I liked, of course, is the whole alternate reality concept, a hint of a multiverse kind of thing. There's one character, Casey, who is, I don't know if Casey would be considered transgender. I mean, they do transition. They were born a girl, then they realized they were a boy, so they transitioned, so now they are a boy. In the present day of the story. So I don't know if they would still be a transgender, or you just say he. I mean, the book just refers to Casey and using the pronoun he. So maybe they aren't transgender anymore because they've transitioned completely. I admit I don't know how all that works. But that's not like a main focus. It's brought up in the story, but it's kind of background information on the character of Casey. And Casey starts out in one version that goes by New Orleans, but then crosses paths into the hidden city, the hidden version of New Orleans, which is NOLA. So not only is Casey the link to the two versions of New Orleans, but also Casey represents transgender, is a transgender character. I don't know what else to say. I thought this was really fun. I liked how the songs I always like the idea of magic taking on a physical form. I thought that was really cool. Like the songs taking on becoming a literal person. I thought that was really cool. And then some of them potentially could become more human. That whole plot idea reminds you of, Buffy season 5, where these monks turn the key into a human girl and Buffy's sister so that Buffy would protect the key. I always thought that was such an interesting concept, the idea of this force taking on a physical form, a human form, and becoming human, but then realizing later the tragedy of realizing they aren't human. They are just a thing, or in this case, a song. To me, that's a very interesting concept. But anyway, I would recommend this, and I think this is a really fun time of year this will be a good time of year to read it, because it's not spooky per se. It's regular fantasy, not like, I wouldn't say it's Halloween, centric, but it definitely has a whimsical, magical, like if you're the kind of person for spooky season or autumn, you like the more magical, whimsical stories, I think this is that type of story. And the fact that you're dealing with zombies and spirits, again, I think this is a good time of year to read something like this. Unless you want to read it during Mardi Gras, Mardi Gras, if you know when that is. I don't know if it's in autumn or a different time of year. I don't remember. I would have to look that up, see what year. You could read it then too, to celebrate Mardi Gras. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that word. But anyway, this was really fun. I hope more people check it and, watch my review and check this out. I think it's definitely worth the read, and, it makes me sad that this is one I'm not familiar with. Wasn't familiar with until now, and that I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, because I definitely think it's worth checking out. I don't know if there's anything people don't like about it, because I liked almost everything about it. But anyway, please check this one out. So that is my review of The Ballad of Perilous Grays by Alex Jennings. And I hope you check this out. I will hope you like this review. I hope you enjoy what you're reading. And I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.